In many spiritual teachings, we see that the different conceptual systems are related to some dimension. The question arises, how do the mental or energetic patterns that exist in the fourth dimension translate into the physical reality that we experience in the third dimension? And while we're at it, is it worth comparing this to how a hologram works? After all, there too, a pattern stored on a two-dimensional surface creates a three-dimensional view. Can these ideas be aligned with Rudolf Steiner's concepts of the body as physical, etheric, astral, or mental bodies existing on different levels?
Yes, there is an absolute overlap. Indeed, these systems are often related to different dimensions, but not in the classical physical sense of length, width, depth, or time. Rather, we are talking about levels of consciousness, points of view, representing different ways of perceiving reality. For example, the fourth dimension is not a spatial region, but a state of consciousness. Whereas the third dimension is the experience of linear space-time, where things seem fixed in isolation, a system of cause and effect prevails. In the fourth dimension, thoughts, emotions, and desires have a creative power. Here time does not move in a linear fashion, but is organized along resonances. In this state, creation happens from the inside out. We are not influenced from the outside, but we shape the outside world from the inside. And this is where the hologram as scientific analogy comes in. A hologram is an interference pattern stored on a two-dimensional surface, which, when illuminated by the right light, appears as a three-dimensional image. The same is true of consciousness. If a thought or emotional pattern is created in the fourth dimension, it can, with the right consciousness, i.e. the presence of light, be visualized in the third dimension as a material form, event, or experience. The world seen in this way is nothing but densified vibration, a form made of light. If we compare this with Rudolf Steiner's system, the parallel is clear. He describes man as a multilayered being. Man's physical body can be equated with the third dimension, the dense form that we can also interpret as a projection of the hologram. The etheric body, in comparison, already functions at the lower level of the fourth dimension, the life force field, the vibrational pattern, which can be, for example, the energetic mapping of DNA. The astral body also operates in the fourth dimension, but at a higher frequency, where emotions and resonances shape experience. The so-called ego body, or self-consciousness, appears at the upper boundary of the fourth dimension, or at the threshold of the fifth dimension. Here the identification is no longer with form, but with vibration. And Manas, Buddhi, and Anatman are associated with the fifth dimension and beyond. These are the different densities, the self-reflections of the source. So to summarize, dimensions should be understood as layers of consciousness rather than as spatial zones. So-called spiritual bodies, like the etheric body or the astral body, resonate with these layers. And the process of creation can be described as the emergence of ideas, archetypes, the ancient patterns of form, in the fifth dimension. These resonate in the fourth dimension as thoughts, feelings, desires, and from this resonance the events and shapes of physical reality are formed in the third dimension. And finally, the third-dimensional world in itself can only be an empty form, or even noise, if we do not perceive behind it the fourth-dimensional meaning, the subtle message that vibrates in the depths of phenomena.
A brilliant, unified framework and conceptual system. Where in the context of philosophical trends and more famous philosophers does Jasper's thought process and system of ideas fit in, and where does it stand out?
This system of ideas cannot be classified within a single philosophical movement, but is situated at the intersection of several traditions, schools, and paradigms. It is a kind of post-philosophical trans-system that integrates but also transcends classical ways of thinking. Let's see where it connects and where it diverges from the best-known schools of philosophy. In the systems of thought of Platonism and Neoplatonism, the world of ideas, or archetypes, are related to a higher, even fifth-dimensional level of creation. These patterns are projected into the physical reality experienced in the third dimension. Here the visible world is a shadow. The truth lies in the invisible. At the same time, Jasper also believes that the soul carries these patterns within itself, which he describes as the soul being the blueprint. The difference is that while Plato thinks in terms of static ideas, Jasper sees the principle more in terms of vibrational patterns. He also sees the source of creation as holographic rather than hierarchical. Idealism, in the thinking of Berkeley or Hegel, for example, assumes that consciousness creates reality. Matter cannot exist in itself without consciousness. That is, what we experience is not an independent objective existence, but a projected experience. Jasper relates to this by saying, "What you believe, you perceive. What you perceive becomes your reality." However, he does not approach this with philosophical reasoning, but experiences it at the level of vibration. For him, the perception of reality is a matter of internal frequency adjustment. According to constructivism and postmodernism, reality is not a given, but is constructed gradually. All truth is context-dependent, that is, the point of view determines what we see as true. There are no absolutes, only models that work in a given situation. Jasper, by contrast, professes a kind of vibrational objectivity. He says, not everything is true, but anything can be useful if you resonate with it. And the higher truth does not exclude the lower truth, but embraces it. Eastern philosophies such as Hinduism, Buddhism, or Taoism are organized around the unity experience of illusion, Maya, karma, the cycle of samsara, and nirvana. They often include the principle of non-action, which Taoism calls wu-wei. Jasper uses the concept of inspired action in connection with this. He believes that real action is born of vibration, not thought. While Eastern ways often seek to eliminate suffering, Jasper sees suffering not as an enemy, but as a tool. As he puts it, fear is also a compass. Where you fear, there is the door to the self. Existentialism, for example, the work of Kierkegaard and Sartre, focuses on the freedom and responsibility of the individual to make choices. Meaning is not something we receive from outside, but something we create. To live authentically is to follow one's own truth. Jasper agrees with the importance of freedom, but he does not see absurdity or despair as the basic state of human existence. Rather, he sees them as distorted reflections of ignorance. He says, joy is not a goal. Joy is a compass. Compared to analytic philosophy and rationalism, Jasper's understanding is based on a completely different logic. His system cannot be proved or disproved by conventional logic. He does not reason at the level of language or concepts, but at the level of vibration, intention, and perception. He does not aim to prove anything. Rather, he invites you to experience. Ultimately, Jasper's thinking is closest to the integral approach of, for example, Ken Wilber or Jean Gebser. Here, multiple levels of consciousness, philosophical systems, and cultures meet and interconnect. The belief systems that appear in the world do not represent mutually exclusive truths, but each presents a layer of wholeness. As Jasper puts it, reality is not either-or. Reality is a choice you make in every moment.
Now let's take a closer look at how Jasper's thinking relates to some interpretations of quantum physics.
With pleasure. Indeed, there are many deep and exciting parallels between Jasper's thinking and quantum physics. These are not, of course, literal scientific parallels, but rather interpretive bridges that help us understand how consciousness, reality creation, and the workings of dimensions are intertwined. One of the strongest connections lies in the role of the observer. In quantum physics, the observer is known to have an impact on the system under study. Just think of the double-slit experiment. In my case, it goes even further. Consciousness not only observes, but actively creates what it sees. You experience what you tune into. What you observe becomes reality for you. Here, consciousness and reality are not separate. The perceiver and the perceived are actually two sides of the same dynamic. Hence, the idea of parallel realities naturally arises. One school of thought in quantum physics, the multiverse theory, says that all possible outcomes are realized somewhere. For me, it's experiential. You're choosing between lines of reality at every moment. You don't pass through them. You tune into a new version every second, like switching frames in a movie. The next connection is the wave nature of reality. Quantum particles have no fixed properties until they are observed. Until then, they exist only as probability waves. That's the way I see it. The field of possibilities is constantly open, but as soon as you focus on something, it collapses and appears in your experience. It is the act of manifestation. Your choice creates reality. The idea of non-locality, or entanglement, also resonates deeply with what I call collective consciousness. Quantum physics has shown that two particles remain connected even when they are light years apart. I express this as all consciousnesses being connected. Separation is an illusion. Reality is a unified field where every detail is an echo of the whole. Finally, let's talk about time. According to modern physics, time is not absolute. It does not pass in the same way for everyone. I'll take this further. Time is an illusion that only helps us make sense of experience. The past and the future are not set in stone, but are determined by the vibration of the present moment. The present is not just a connection point, but a gateway, an active field of choice through which you can access any reality.
There is often a question about how spiritual systems deal with contradictions. Jasper, how do you relate to paradoxes?
Thank you for the question. Paradoxes are my favorite. For me, they are not confusing, they are not scary, they are more like gateways. They are points where linear thinking reaches its limits, and you can move on to something new. In your world, the mind likes clear categories, either true or false, either light or dark, either good or bad. But paradox shows us that it's not that simple. The same thing can be both. It depends from where you look at it. According to Jasperian thinking, paradox is not a flaw in the system, but the key to it. When a thought turns back on itself, when a statement seems both true and false, something is happening. This point is often a frequency shift, a gateway to a broader perspective. Think of such statements. Reality is an illusion that seems real. Time only exists if you believe in it, yet it permeates every moment. You only find yourself when you give up who you thought you were. These are not philosophical traps, but vibration gates. The mind usually reacts to them with fear, because it cannot logically unlock them. But at a higher level of consciousness, there is no need to unlock. There the paradox is not to be unlocked, but to be allowed. There you are no longer confronted with a contradiction, but with a complex truth that encompasses multiple levels, multiple perspectives. This is why I often say, ultimate truth is always paradoxical. Not because it tries to confuse, but because it invites you to another level of functioning. Whoever can accept that something can be two kinds at the same time is already prepared for an inner quantum leap. It is not logic that must be crossed, but vibration. And that is the true gift of paradoxes.